This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi. This morning I'd very much like to explore with you the third passage of the meditation classic known as Song of Enlightenment, composed oh so many centuries ago by the great Buddhist teacher Jung Jie. Please forgive my pronunciation. And it begins. Sing what is real, but no persons or things, instantly quenches the fires of hell. Whereas those who deceive others with lies deny the efficacy of the Buddha's sudden path, deserve to spend aeons or that's an interesting editing choice on my part. Let me see if I can't remedy that. Deserve to spend kalpas or aeons having their tongues torn out. Well, that's an extremely grotesque hyperbole. Let's see if we can suss this out. The author is using the language of patriarchy to scold patriarchy. Patriarchy is fond of coercion and threats of hell, eternal torment, and the like. They are also notorious in their quest for prestige to commit the crime of, commit the logical fallacy of moving the goalposts, wherein they take a goal and they keep changing what it means to accomplish that goal. Ask a member of patriarchy, regardless of their lineage, be their lineage Theravadan, Mahāyanan, or Vajrayana, they will tell you that if someone's a Buddha, they will not feel certain emotions, they will only feel other certain emotions, and it takes a ridiculous length of time and profound hardship. However, when we read the earliest texts attributed to the Buddha, I'm looking at the Satipatthana Sutta, or the Discourse on the Four Bases of Mindfulness. In the penultimate, or second to the final passage, it is written that one could master the path in as little as 7 days. And so we see a great distinction between proto-Buddhism and institutional Buddhism, between matriarchy and patriarchy. One of the great ironies is that in contemporary Zen, there is a lineage that describes itself as the quick path, and yet it still talks about requiring multiple decades. I'm sorry, it describes itself as the sudden path, and yet it still requires multiple decades. The author of this text was opposed to that. He was all about sudden enlightenment. But that begs the question, what is enlightenment? And to explore that in greater detail, I would like to share with you another visual aid. So I'm going to tap the OBS button 9, going to tap the appropriate Word document, and take you on a merry ride. Let's see, what is this? 18. So what if enlightenment was simply getting so good at the techniques of the Buddha's Eightfold Path that we practice them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? We are not strangers to mastery As children, we were veritable mastery machines. We were demanded. It was demanded of us that we learn how to use the commode instead of a diapers, and we learn how to brush our teeth, tie our shoes, and even ride a bike. No less, learn to read and write our native language. And most of us have. So mastery is not something for the elite few. We are wired for this. It is a survival mechanism, it could be argued. And still, we can feel overwhelmed by the number of things to be mastered. After all, 8 is a big number compared to the 5 digits of a single hand. But here's the good news. If one has simply practices mindfulness and meditation at least once every 12 hours or so, then one will experience then one will spontaneously experience the remaining 6 folds of the path. If one practices mindfulness and meditation, one cannot help but notice change and non-graspability, whether one wants to or not. This is not some spooky supernatural thing. This comes down to neuroscience, a detail of which I will explore with you in just a handful of minutes. In fact, I might as well explore it with you right now. Why keep you waiting? The many myths surrounding meditation can be dispelled with a superficial examination of neuroscience. One need only browse the videos on YouTube on the subject of neuroscience composed by students of neuroscience or teachers of neuroscience to see these explanations. I am not an amateur scientist, I'm just a meditation teacher, but these explorations based on fMRI studies, other people's fMRI studies, have echoed my personal experience. Perhaps they will for you as well. Our central nervous system contains many organelles, and like any tool, they can be used or abused. When we abuse our dorsolateral or medial prefrontal cortex to overfocus or overanalyze, we can become so fatigued that we begin presenting with symptoms of depression, no less triggering our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression. So anything that triggers our amygdala is not a really useful tool if we wish to cultivate greater peace and love. But here's the good news. Neither the amygdala nor the prefrontal cortex constitute the entirety of our central nervous system. Consider, if you will, our spinal cord. Its fancy term, or its fancy description, could be the hub of our autonomic nervous system. When we take a break from our exhausting habit of actively competing against it, instead passively cooperate with it, what we notice is that the aggression and anxiety of our amygdala is calmed, and conversely, the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated, non-neurotically stimulated. That's fabulous. And that brings us back to the second, third, fourth, and fifth folds of the Buddha's path. A kindness that influences our intentions, communications, conduct, and even commerce. But what about impermanence? Glad you asked. Let's take a deeper dive into our autonomic nervous system. It has two chief components. We will explore them now. When it comes to mindfulness, every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we seem to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, which could be described as the hub of our sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way, to help us to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. It has evolved to help us to notice perceptions, such as seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like. It has evolved to help us to notice the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. It has evolved to help us notice the full spectrum of human existence, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. But what are we to do with that which we have noticed? The single word answer would be meditation. You see, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the tippy top and the very bottom of that same spinal cord. These two regions, working as a team, could be described as the hub of our parasympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during our exhalation to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel a trifle less stressful, a little bit less permanent, a little bit less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. When I was in 4th grade, my teacher explained that simile is only as effective as it is relatable. We therefore have to ask the question, what? What is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel non-graspable to the hand? And so we see that both emptiness and no self are simply metaphors to describe the fleeting experience latent within every exhalation. Until, of course, our next inhalation, when the cycle begins afresh. And so we see just by cooperating with our autonomic nervous system, by using the convenient tools of inhalation and exhalation, we cannot help but notice change, the fleeting experience of impermanence and emptiness that conspire to help us to let go and to cope with what Shakespeare described as the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. The 6th fold of the Eightfold Path is sometimes described as right effort or effortless effort or wu wei or going with the flow. What I have observed is that the more we authentically practice mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices and utterances and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, not from wild scatteredness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity. It is this deeply centered spontaneity which is integral for for us using the entirety of the organelles of our central nervous system in the most sustainable way. When we read the biographies or autobiographies of Nobel laureates, we see people who, of course, have mastered their STEM areas. But in addition to that, in addition to memorizing and understanding all the tools that STEM has available for them, they also, each of them came to a dead end in their experimentation. And prior to their breakthrough, each of them took a step back and relaxed and recreated. And what we see is people, whether they know it or not, we're taking a whole brain approach or a whole central nervous system approach to the project of exercising their genius. Perhaps that is why Albert Einstein explained that creativity was intelligence at play. Albert Einstein was fond of fanciful thought experiments. He used to ditch class, hang out at a Vienna cafe, and daydream about what it would be like to ride a photon. He had mastered STEM, and he used creativity and rest and relaxation and recreation as a tool to support his intellect. I think we'll find that mindfulness and meditation might serve you as well. Let's return to this morning's teaching text. Sing what is real, but no persons or things, instantly quenches the fires of hell. This is highly figurative language. All languages contain figures of speech, but especially languages recorded in ideograms. They are highly metaphoric. So what do we mean by the opening couplet, sing what is real but no persons or things? Simply this. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever persons we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, less tangible. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever things we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel somewhat less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and less tangible. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever real or imagined karma we might have perceived or imagined during our previous inhalation could feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even less tangible. And once again, we see the genius of this author using the tools of patriarchy to undermine their malarkey. Patriarchy is keen to frighten us, to have us be motivated by fear of punishment or desire for reward. Matriarchy says the ultimate morality is simply loving kindness. And the dynamo which grants us access to this loving kindness is simply noticing and relaxing in harmony with our phases of breath. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel, for Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers, just like